It is my honor and privilege to introduce our first speaker today, Ruth Eberle. I came to know Ruth around 2006 when she brought her first two daughters, Kate and Addie, to story time at my library. After that, I had a front row seat to her adoption story. I have been blessed to witness her journey as it became God's calling in her life. Several years ago, I was approached by a lady who came into, again, the library. She asked if I could make any recommendations for a speaker for their upcoming mother-daughter banquet. I immediately suggested Ruth. The lady looked pensive and said, "We would really like somebody with a collection of Easter bonnets." So I said, probably with this face, that I would ask Ruth if she happened to have an Easter bonnet collection. Surprisingly, she said she did not. So unfortunately, she was not the speaker for them. Lucky for us, however, we did not have such a requirement. In Ruth's own words, she is mom to 18, 2 biological sons, 2 stepsons, 2 stepdaughters, and 12 adopted daughters. She's a Christian, a feed broker, and she loves her life. Fun fact, Ruth does not speak Chinese Mandarin. She knows the following 3 phrases: I love you, no, and stop yelling. In my words, she is dedicated, hardworking, a friend, and nothing short of inspirational. Please help me in welcoming. I was not going to do this. My very special friend, Ruth Eberle.
Let's see, it's this one. Is it yellow light? So am I across them? You hear me? I have gotten very good at a very carrying voice over the years anyway, so making sure that everybody pays attention to me in my house. And they do. You know, it's like whenever people say that if your mother said Ruth Eberle, you know, you thought about it, but then once she said Ruth Denise Eberle, I said. So we were very fortunate that we knew the girls' Chinese names, that the orphanage had signed them, and we used their Chinese names as their middle names. So my girls always pay attention even when I just say their first and last, because I do not have the tonnage that to say their Chinese names as fluently as they do. So they definitely pay attention to their first names. So when Anita asked me if I would speak today, well, the excitement in my head and heart was so overwhelming. I'm going to see if I got a picture. To be able to share our adoption story, even when at home the next few days, the 2 girls that still live at home, they ask, so what are you going to talk about? Who are you going to speak about? Don't speak about me. Are you going to talk about Lynn? About Kay? We all spoke about the hundreds of stories that I could share, and then I sat down to get organized, and well, my daughter's photo is an example of myself when it hit me. That I would need to whittle all of these moments into 30 minutes. I needed to be able to respect my family's personal space. We did turn down a TLC reality TV show because my ex-husband, Claude, well, I ruined part of that surprise, we had made the decision that if we agreed to this TLC reality show, that all of the kids had to agree, and they did not, and so we did not do the show. But I also needed to bring adoption to you in this 30 minutes. As Anita introduced me, a mom to 18, Christian, a feed broker, as well as a wife to my high school sweetheart, well, I don't always excel in all of these positions at the same time, although I do try to juggle as many as possible. I have to frequently put my forehead on the steering wheel of my car before getting out to walk across the street to my office. And I ask, am I a child of God? And thankfully, every time I receive the answer, yes, you are. although there's a lot of days that I feel like I ask that question 10 times or more. Or several times a day I feel like I should get back in the car. So, I sincerely ramble when I speak. I get passionate when speaking about my children and family so much that my chest will get tight. I'll hold tissues, and I sort of feel squeezed when talking. The same way I feel when speaking about God and prayers and adoption and, well, just life. I admit that God and I meet in the barn. At one time we had 13 horses, so there was a lot of barn time. In the garden, having such a large family, we had a very large garden. Over breakfast with the family, and always in the car, at the dinner table, and in churches. I sought God going through my first divorce. My mother was dying at the same time as my divorce. Then losing my mom, I remarried, started my own company, buying a house, raising 2 sons, and melding my family with my new second husband who had 2 sons. These boys all took to each other as though they knew each other all of their life, maybe like even from the womb, that they were all 4 were together because they got along the same as any siblings would, whether it was having a blast screwing up the family pictures or whether it was just life in general. They still, 32 years later, they still are brothers at times. During this time, I firmly believed that God frequently got worn out trying to keep me on a path of His, where my planning was His laughing. In 2001, I was told that I had thyroid cancer. My mom had died from cancer. I had had an elective hysterectomy so that I did not get cancer. My screaming, my shouting while pounding my husband's chest saying I was not to get cancer. I am not proud to say that my fist had even left a dent in the drywall. Before leaving for the hospital, I sat in our home in my creaking rocking chair wrapped in this very quilt that my mom had made for me, the only finished quilt that she had ever made. And I asked these questions. God, I asked a lot of questions, and I really need to know, have I done all of these requirements? You know, that people talk about, that you're accepted? Have I said all the right words? Did I understand your book, and am I a child of yours? And immediately, the room had a feeling, a presence, a comfort to me. And I knew then that yes, I was, and I am a child of God. That I would beat cancer, that I would still be a wife, I would still get to trade feed, but most of all, I'm a child of God. That day, my rambling as always prayer had words I've never uttered. Please, Lord, the children that need medicine, give it to them. The children that need food, please give them food. And here's the kicker. And Lord, the children that need parents' arms to hold them, give them parents. After that day, I uttered those words frequently, and I grew in faith. Later years, we were given a plaque that said, "We plan, God laughs." Many times over the next few years, we were touched by children's needs. We were exposed several times to adoption stories. I mean, come on, by then, all of our sons had grown, and they were all out of the house. We had shown them the floor plans. Hey, guys, if you have to come home, there's a couch, and you can stay on it, but there's 1 bedroom. We were all about horses, Harley, and Aruba. The new home we had built had 1 bedroom. It was very simple. It was very rustic. Anita knows I don't cook. I joked that I did not even want a stove. I just needed a microwave and a sink in the kitchen. Lots of times that was it. Then in January 2004, a couple that we knew at a convention that was part of my attendance with my job, this couple that we knew introduced us to their new daughter from China. We knew then that we were following a path. We had wanted to have children together, Claude and I, but I'm an insulin-dependent diabetic and have been since I was 29. And the doctors looked at us and just grinned and said, you know, you got 4 boys, why don't you enjoy them? so we never had children together. We planned, God laughs, because now what's this path going to be? When I told my father in February of 2004 that we were adopting, his response was chilling. That his idea of tithing had always been keeping his family off of welfare. And then during our paper pregnancy, that's what this is called when you're adopting, a paper pregnancy, he softened his stance and asked about this little girl. He asked to travel with us for our Kate in August of 2004. She was 22 months old. Through the next stories, I hope that I'm sharing success, grief, and fear that's involved in adoption. This is my dad. This shows you one of the first photos that we were given of Kate, and we cried over it, and we realized, well, I realized that I would have to learn how to do little girls' hair. I barely do my own, right, Anita? I'm definitely not a hair person. We traveled in August and learned a lot about how a child under such stress copes, how they already have routines unlike ours, and how my father became the grandparent that wanted to hold, kiss, and play with our bundle of joy. My dad would use his pocket knife to break up peppermint candies, and he would give them little pieces to her. Later, she inherited my dad's pocket knife when he passed away. And us, horses Harley and Aruba, we gained a diaper bag. Along with this little girl, who would have thought that we, already grandparents to 3, would again be hauling around a diaper bag and a blankie. God forbid the blankie was ever forgotten, let alone lost. I even tried buying a second blanket that was the same feel. It didn't smell the same. Mom, no smell. Hey, it really stinks. We found that our daughter loved horses. Imagine how excited I was one day when her first English word was ma, as she walked right by me saying ma, going up to pet the horse. And that's the Chinese word for horse. She and my father shared a love for horses, and he was always watching and talking to her about horses. He talked to her about agriculture. He attended her National Honor Society induction, and they aged together. This is my Kate. We then adopted our A in October of 2005. What a treasure. She was 44 months old when I met her, and she was sitting on the floor at the Civil Affairs Office. I would like to interject that if you hear me say SWI, that stands for Social Welfare Institute. It's prettier than saying orphanage, right? So I'll use SWI. She had her favorite potato chips and a juice box. When it was time to take her with me, the fright was overwhelming for her and myself and my sister. What if she didn't calm down? These tears were not something that a Band-Aid or a popsicle would solve. Later, she started smiling, and she loved the jewelry. We found that she knew how to make her own bed, but what brought us to tears the first night was when she laid down with her head barely on her pillow. This is her in a crib. At 44 months, she still would have slept in a crib. There's a reason. She laid down with her head barely on her pillow. Then she laid 2 dolls side by side, their heads on the pillow, covered herself by putting the blanket behind her shoulder, leaning against the rails, pulling the blanket over and covering the babies, and then turning to them. And she sang to them good night. Being an older child in a SWI brought responsibilities, caring for babies. She could bounce a baby on her hip just as well as I could, and she used diaper pins to change diapers. A later conversation that Addie had with Grandpa Tom was, "Hey, Grandpa, I'm Irish, right?" I could hear he was so stumped. I mean, like a fish. And then he expressed, "Why, yes, Addie, there is Irish in our family tree. You are part Irish." God was there. He not only had placed Addie in our arms to hold her, but he had linked this little girl, as Asian as they come, to being part Irish. She still celebrates St. Patrick's Day at the age of 22, and thank goodness the Marine that she married is stationed in Beaufort, South Carolina, and they hold one of the largest St. Patrick's Day parades, and I have a picture of her with her green shirt and everything. So some stories are incredible, how the pieces fall into place. Adopting our next daughter as an even older child, one that had ties to other children in the orphanage. When she left the orphanage, her best friend, shown here, never even said goodbye to her, jealous that it was not her being adopted the same as others that she had watched to leave for their families. The stress of meeting this blonde American mom, I used to be blonde, woman with gifts of hair barrettes, dolls, new clothes, well, it just didn't go well, and I'm not going to describe. But let me tell you that it did not go well. God guided me a lot during these forward years of learning to love this mighty little girl as well as she, the same as me. He guided me to sit or to lean when speaking to her, as well as to the other girls, because that way I wasn't towering over her. I wasn't threatening. He taught me to hear her. Me sitting down, looking at her, I could now hear her. And to see her and to learn that sending her to timeout, to a place that she was separated from me, even if it was a screen door and she could still see me, was beyond painful to her. And to instead have her do tasks with me, sometimes several tasks until her anger passed. He taught me about her pain. Most of all, I would get the dishes done. We adopted this little girl in the summer of 2007, and when we arrived home, she would share with me her life, a lot of times through the middle of the night. This is an interview that she and I wrote years ago, hoping to help parents adopting older children to understand what these children are going through. This little interview took place on what was considered her adoption day. She said that I was very sad because I would never see my friends again. In the orphanage, these friends are their family. It's hard to understand that adoption is taking them away from their family. When I woke up, I realized that I was leaving today. They were rushing me to dress nicely, and a lady with curly hair made my hair into a nice bun. I swear that those buns would pull their eyebrows up. This is me, I said many prayers that day for her acceptance of me as her mama. I put on my favorite lotion, hoping she would think that it was a pleasant smell. We also spoke, my travel companion, her name was Carolyn, in hushed tones about what if she was not accepting, and our plans of handling this. Even in the adoption training, they do teach us about children that say no, and they have that option. They can say no. I mean, adoption training prepares you for everything, and you read and read so to comply with the process, but also to be able to understand what your child will be experiencing. Well, nothing that I've read experienced me for those hours. She goes on to say, the lady that helped me with my hair, she was like a sister to us. She was a protector and would stand up for me. When people say that orphanage kids don't have a family, well, they're wrong, because we are all a big family. When I walked out the door, I started bawling. My best friend did not even say goodbye to me, because her dream of being adopted was again not coming true, as she was watching another friend, me, leave for their adoption. I go on to say that I think we ate lunch. We both were so nervous waiting for the time to meet them. We knew they had a several-hour drive to arrive at the hotel. You have to realize that a lot of times these kids haven't even been in a car. So some of the kids would have arrived being very car sick. When the guide came and got us, we went to his room and waited. Carolyn had set up the video camera to catch our first glimpse of her, to hear the first words, "Mama," to capture the first hug. And suddenly we heard a commotion in the hallway, and the people were slowing down outside of the room. It's time. She's here. She's crying very loudly. She said, I looked in the door of the room and I saw my mom, and I wanted to run and scream. I couldn't control my fright. I said, the director of the SWI came into the room and started talking with the guide while the lady that was with our daughter vanished from the doorway, dropping her purse. I moved towards the door to gather her purse and her other belongings scattered in the hallway, and knowing from the sounds that my daughter was frightened, and so only glanced that way so that I could at least see her. I went back in the room. I did finally go to the door again, hoping that maybe a toy would help, or a drink of water. But what I saw then was this little girl that was so frightened, holding hands with the lady, but at full arm's length, and being spoke to in words that had to be encouraging her to come into the room, all the while trying to get her to the door. I went back into the room, hoping to not scare her further. Finally, in the room, and she was close enough for me to touch her. Looking down, this is her, she was looking down. Occasionally her eyes were sliding over to look at me. She's wringing wet, splotchy red face, moments of sniffles, trying to get the lady to leave the room with her, but still curious as to the new pictures that I had brought. The doll, forget it. More pictures? Okay. Don't touch me. Okay. Rub my back gently. No, don't. Carolyn said that she was shutting off the camera, that this was too painful to record. I knew that V had had a very long day, and I was worried that when the orphanage people left that she would not eat, and we would be holed up in the hotel room, not able to leave. We went downstairs with the guide and the other people. And my daughter, while we were going downstairs, she tried very hard to get to go out of the hotel, not once wanting to go outside alone, but doing things like taking the lady's purse and turning and walking away from her, which made the lady go after her. While at the dinner table, the lady sat down, and then she sat our daughter next to her, and then she motioned to me to sit next to her. And I'm like, this child does not want me. Doesn't even want to sit by me. Well, that went over really well. She sat to the farthest edge of the chair, and she would not look at me, nor would she turn towards me, all the while either quiet or with tears. She didn't eat. My daughter said, I kept holding the lady's hand, and when the two people wanted to leave, the orphanage people, I put my hands in the lady's hair, and I grabbed it, pulling it so that the adults could not make me stay. I would have to go with her because I'm attached to her hair. The adults tried to grab my hands and make me let go of her hair. I didn't want to be in this room. When you get an American mom, a person that you've never seen in your life, it is very terrifying, like literally. I do want you to know that years later we did return, and I took this lady some beautiful hair combs and hairbrushes. And her hair is beautiful. Me, as time moved on through this, it was time that they leave. It was time that we just fish or cut bait. I sat on the bed, and I held her. And finally, it was only her and I in the room, me rocking her and rocking her, say in Chinese, what I mean, I love you. Do not cry. I think it's Bu Ya Chao. Do not cry. I love you. Do not cry. All the while, the fright echoed in my brain, and my body was being rocked. My prayers were just pounding. Please, Lord, help this child accept this. Lord, help her fear. And I'm telling her, I love you. Do not cry. I love you. Well, then she stopped. I mean, like, she stopped. Drew in a ragged breath, did a little shudder, and shook loose from me. Stood up next to me and kept drawing breaths, just heaving breaths. I kept still, but then she pointed to the door. Well, first I got her a washcloth and helped her freshen a little. And then we went out to the living room, and she marched right to that exit door and attempted to convince us to go out. Boo, that means no. So if you ever see a Chinese child and you go, boo, they don't think that that's peekaboo, they're thinking no. So you reinvent how to play peekaboo too. We asked her if she was hungry. Yes, and that was sign language. So thankfully, the in-room menu had pictures, and we ordered room service. We finally gave her the phone. She ordered room service. I was in a hotel room. This is what she says. I was in a hotel room with them. I tried to run away from them, but they would not let me out. They locked all the doors. I had a horrible day, and I still don't know why I was so terrified. We had talked about the adoption training, and we had nervously discussed what if we had a child that was so frightened. I laugh now, but we had traveled with a roll of duct tape. Well, everybody travels to China with duct tape. You can hem blue jeans, you can splint an ankle. And the plan was to lock the doors with taping them across the upper corners out of her height reach. But if all else failed, we had decided we would put a mattress on the floor in front of the door. Anything to keep our daughter safe. So after the food arrived, we used the tape. This was a big show. Boy, this mom. We used the tape on the door, and then a show of strength of the lock system that we had developed, we put noisy shopping bags in front of the door. So we had a child that she saw that this was going to be really hard. Maybe she should just give it up. So we had a little girl that was just so worn out. She laid down on the couch, and we put a blanket over her, and she snuggled in. And then we hear, Wana, Tua, Ria. Hello? How are you? Do you need the toilet? Are you hungry? I am sick. And Carolyn and I are just looking at each other, and we're like, what? She has some English. Soon she was in giggles. She changed into her new pajamas, and she snuggled into bed with a tiny little flashlight that I had given her and the Barbies that we had brought, and she slept all night. These pictures, I really wanted to share to show you some of this little process, but I wasn't going to leave them up like what I have the others. So this is us going to the dining room. The next day we had to go back to the Civil Affairs office, and this is her reading the papers, trying to convince her to say yes. The fright had returned. At one point, I had given her a pinky ring, and I showed her that it was my pinky promise to always love her and care for her, and she was wearing the ring. At this point, I'm sitting to her right, and she took the ring off, and she slid it over to me. At that point, because of the situation, I had put my head down on the table and had thought to myself, this child just needs to be allowed to go back to the orphanage. This is so painful. Instead, she said yes. This is us walking to the van. It looks like I've really got a hold of her arm, but really I'm holding it like this. I just needed the ability to know that she was staying next to me. Bubblegum and barrettes. I swear bubblegum, even when she got home, I've got pictures of her out in the yard, and she's got the biggest bubbles. Bubblegum and barrettes got this child through. So, we went on to adopt P in 2008, M and G in 2009, and then in 2011 we found that we could adopt that little girl that had never said goodbye. We did not tell V about this plan, but when we did, it was with as much assurance as we could have gotten that we would be traveling to bring home TMZ, and that was when we told V. She was so relieved. She was excited, over the top, in love with this situation. V, let me see, what did I write? Now TMZ, now Forever Sisters. My daughter V had advocated every day for 4 years for TMZ. Every single day. These two young ladies, they're forces to be reckoned with. They're both Christians. They're both children of God, and they're very special young ladies. They're very strong, and I'm very thankful that they call me Mom. Life did keep moving. We adopted another K in 2012, W and L in 2014. I finally didn't spend adoption money, and so we did landscaping in 2015. And at the same time, when we had adopted in 2009 from Beijing, there was a little girl there that seemed more connected to myself and my daughter, my two daughters that I was adopting, than to the family that was adopting her. And she came to us, and we became her guardians because she was not doing well in her home. I can fast forward and tell you that she did return home. She still wasn't extremely successful in that home. She's in the Army, and she just complains that she's stationed to her first station, and it's in Hawaii. So, then we traveled back to China in 2017. This one is the cake topper. Taking 5 of the girls to visit their cities and to bring home S&S. My travel companion, Jill, she would walk in the front. She was taller, she had longer hair, she was blonde, and in China, a person like that kind of spreads the waves, you know? And I brought up the back because I knew every hair on those girls' head. So that's how we traveled. One day we were going from a new orphanage that our daughter had left across town to the original one that she had been taken into as an orphan, when such daughter tapped my leg and said, Mom, my family, they live there. I'm like, well, do we need to stop? No, I'm very scared. A moment in time happened that afternoon. 4 hours later, very hot, sweating, up and down stairs, saying to my daughter, this mama is fat, this backpack is very heavy, and I'm hot. We were going up and down stairs, and we were going building to building. The buildings, one after the other, are the same, except for a number on them. We would pause while she would say, I don't remember what one, and she would just pat her chest, and she would search. Maybe this one. After 4 hours of combing this 4-block area, street to street, matching apartment buildings, we were in the correct building. Her frantically pounding on the apartment door, yelling, answer, answer. I know you're in there, answer. We were very fortunate, though, that a bystander came forward and called the lady that lived there. We drove back across town, and we reunited Kim with her aunt and uncle and cousins. Later that night and the next morning, she was reunited with more family, with her father and her father's family. In 2018, I was able to reunite her with her mother and mother's family. Lovely people. These people are so lovely, and they love her so dearly. This is my daughter's mother. Her mother is the top second one in, next to the gentleman. That's her biological mother. And the grandmother that she's sitting on the lap, that grandmother raised her. And her aunt that is next to the little girl in the yellow dress, the young lady that's there is a cousin that is actually the same age as her, and they were raised together until the age of 7. This mother, she loves her daughter so deeply that after she disappeared from her life, she carried a snapshot of Kay with her everywhere, tucked in her bra. We found out that now Kay has 2 bio sisters and a little brother. This is a photo of her with her father and her grandmother. Honestly, there was no reason to run DNA. It was as though one had a dress, one had a pants. When having to leave her mother and family, It was overwhelming for her, and thankfully, she turned to me for comfort. It was very difficult being in the van, and the grandmother and the mother's hands were on the glass. They kept their hands on the glass as the van kept moving. Sometimes the van would stop just so that they were safe. We also found that on her maternal family side that she's of the Meow group. This shows what their dress is during special times. And yes, the outfit and the crown, it was all gifted to her by her maternal grandmother. And we very carefully carried it as carry-on to make sure it arrived home with us. Another kind of really cool thing is that we now know her true birthday. So today is Kim's birthday. Otherwise, it was in June. So this photo, 2018. People tell us that we've been saints for saving these girls. I don't see that I saved them. I adopted my daughters. But sometimes I feel like ranting. You know, the people that have that way of being able to chant when they talk or rap when they talk, I would love to be able to do that. I rant that adoption took them away from their orphanage families. I rant that adoption took them away from their gnomes. They knew their food, their water, their laundry routines. I mean, come on. These girls even had to change into our bathrooms because bathrooms are not even the same. They had to learn new ways of everyday living, clothes, food, school, a school bus, pets. Adoption took them away from their protectors. Adoption took them away from their foster parents that had raised them since before the age of 1 until they were 12. If they had been in foster care, adoption took them away from their foster parents. Adoption took them away from the sounds of their language and their surroundings. Fortunately, as we continued growing our family of daughters, fortunately, when they would come home, the new children coming in, they were surrounded more and more because now there's noodles in our house and there's hot sauce and, you know, all the smells and the language because we encouraged them to keep their language. It took me a long time to realize that we had given them all of these things that adoption had taken away. It took me a longer time to accept that I had not taken it away from them, rather that God knows the hair on every child's head, and that we are part of his plan, that we are children of God. I know God's plan. I know that plan, even when he would belly laugh, I know there's a plan and that only he knows the twists and curves that he's throwing at us. Where and what are some moments in all of this plan? Our Kate, we had never had to think of a girl's name. And one night I sat up and very excited and I said, I know her name. And Claude was like, what? He said, Chris, Andrew, Thomas, and Eric. Kate. That's our Kate. Kate telling us one day that God saved making China into the last country because he needed to know how big to make China so that they could make everything for the rest of the world. She was 3. My father traveling with us to China to bring Kate home, he became a new, kind, and forgiving man after that trip. His statement when I told him that we were adopting was his idea of tithing, was keeping his family off of welfare. After that trip, and after he lived the next 14 years loving this child, enjoying the passion of horses, National Honor Society induction, and agriculture with her, he learned how God works. He learned about tithing. By 2009 or so, I was tired. I worked full time. My ranchers knew that they could call me starting at 6 a.m. until 9 p.m. I now had girls in 3 different schools, one Stark County school, one elementary school in Princeville, and one high school in Princeville. And later we had one that traveled to Richwoods for the deaf hard of hearing unit. By 2009, I'm going to start over. I was so tired. A full-time mom, I worked full-time and some days I worked double-time, all the while being the taxi to girls for everything from usual appointments as well as sports, music lessons at Bradley. I was not having fun. Zero. We hired a full-time mommy helper. Oh, it was so great. She came in at 10 after 7. We tag team. I would go get my shower in by 7:20. We were in the van. Cindy, she's a child of God. Her husband and she were led to adopt 3 daughters from China. They're also children of God. One of our daughters, ELL teacher, and her husband was led to adopt 2 boys from China. They also joined the family that he created. In 2011, the daughter that was friends with V, we knew had severe scoliosis. She had 12 hours of surgery to straighten her spine. And during that time, I more than had God moments. Of the 7 spiritual blessings from God, I heavily relied on his wisdom, his understanding, and he gave me and my daughter fortitude as we grew weary, and he healed her back. I was invited in years ago, because once you get 12 children at home, you stop being invited. I say to you, if you don't want to invite the whole family, at least invite the parents. So, I have girls that have never attended a wedding because we are not invited. So they always ask me, what does wedding cake taste like? So, I was invited to a Bible study where Kelly Troya was a speaker. She's great. She spoke about laughter, not about giggles, not about small chuckles, not about laughing, but rather full belly roll laughs with your head thrown back, and she gave us the example. How that expression is something that everyone occasionally, if not daily, needs. Then she asked, are you a child of God? Well, I don't do groups well. I'm really quiet. Normally. So in my head was a yes, I am. Then Kelly asked us to take our hand and touch our chest and ask ourselves, am I a child of God? And seeing Kelly's hand, her finger curled as she raised her hand to her chest, her fingers lightly touching her body, was an image that I will never forget. I've replaced it with my forehead on the steering wheel, but I will never forget that. By doing this, by mimicking her, bringing my hand up, my fingers curled automatically as Kelly's had, and asking myself, am I a child of God? In 2019, it was expected, but it wasn't. My husband and I divorced. 27 years, 364 days. By that time, we had little girls that are now young women, in college, with jobs, some still in school, living at home. All were spreading their wings. And now, with split households, a new norm had to be learned. And then COVID locked down. I managed on the farm with 8 daughters, a son that had come home, and a grandson. I think that I need to interject, and I'm sorry if I take more than 30 minutes, I need to interject that our 1-bedroom home had, in 2004, been added onto, again in 2009, again in 2012. One daughter came home from school one day and said, Mom, this kitty asked me how long I wait in line to go to the bathroom. Why would he ask me that? And I said, honey, nobody has 7 bathrooms. So, when I sold my house last year, my house had 14 bedrooms and 7 bathrooms. We were very blessed. We never went on vacation. We always built on. I was managing with 8 daughters, a son and a grandson at home, and we all fit. We had 7 bathrooms. I was also at home being able to work the same as if at the office. And then in October of that year, my son called me. This is where Anita and I need tissues. I've stood in Anita's office so many times, and this is where I get tight. I don't know how I did this. In October of that same year, my son Alex called me. He's my firstborn, screaming and crying, gasping for his breath to utter the words, "Mom, Natalie is dead." His youngest daughter, age 15, we called her Bug. Nat, get it? Natalie, Nat, Bug. A car wreck, gone from this earth instantly to now have wings. My then fiance Lynn, high school sweetheart, drove me to Sterling to hold my son. I had called my son's best friend, and his wife went to hold my son until I could get there. She walked into that hospital, and the chaplain, who had known her since she was a toddler, was there. He'd known her since she was a toddler. He knew his parents. He knew her siblings. She walked up to him and said, "I am Alex's sister, and take me to him." And he did, knowing that she was not related to him. She held him for me until I got there. Walking into the ER, I was putting on a mask as I walked, and the chaplain looked at me, and he automatically said, "Are you Alex's mom?" I did not have that wrote on my forehead. He knew. And as I walked right to him, he matched his steps to mine as we went to the right. Turning left was a hallway with EMTs, both sides of the hallway, and other ambulance people lining the hall. These were Natalie's mom's coworkers. Her mom is an EMT. And at the door to the room, I turned and I looked at each one of those people, and I said, "Thank you for caring for our Natalie." Gathered air in my lungs, and I went into a room that was filled in despair. I like that ringtone better. Huge, deep sorrow, rolling tears, and our Natalie was there as though taking a nap. COVID changes things. This was Natalie. And this is her at 15. COVID changes things. Even entering a hospital was taboo, and they wanted us to leave as soon as we could. I asked these young people, parents, her siblings, her grandmother, to stand in a circle, and we held hands, mine on my Natalie, and I prayed for all. Where does those voices come from? You never think that you've got that straight. And for the driver of the car, we prayed, as well as the driver of the semi that hit them. And then we went home. The days then changed. My son's shoulders were so bent over, and his voice changed. All of us grieved in different ways. Some, like myself, tried to only be the caretaker, and we forget to grieve. My last 2 years, last year and a half, has been grieving. My son is healed. Now I can breathe. Alex's words explained to me that for him, it's the events that Nat should have been part of that really hurt. High school graduation. Her stepsisters shared the very same birthday, the same hospital that they were born in, the same everything. She carried a picture of Nat and set it on the chair next to her. Family photos, there is now a blank spot. She's still there, but not visible to the eye, only felt with our hearts. Every family gathering that we have, I make her favorite chocolate cupcake with chocolate frosting. Nobody knew that until last year that I told them. Our Nat's here. Alex has came to St. Louis to be with me and my Shelby in 2022, also a daughter with severe scoliosis. He came the night before yet another back surgery. I don't think that you can see it, but on his hand is a dad and a daughter with wings. Notice the tattoo on the back of his hand, one daughter with wings. He was holding and comforting his 15-year-old sister, a sister that was the same age as Nat was when she passed away. I'm thankful that his shoulders have mostly straightened and his voice has almost always gained back its strength. He went on to change the world. He went on to change it in such a drastic way that the intersection that Natalie died at, that people had texted and spoke about for years that it should have been changed, he spearheaded that is now a safe intersection with a huge roundabout, large enough to handle the semis that pull the great big wind turbine thing. In 2020, I remarried. Let me see. There you go. This man, the high school sweetheart that I had dated almost all of high school, and then we went our separate ways for 44 years. Well, we got married outside of his mom's assisted living facility so that she could witness this December 12th. And I realized when we had agreed to wear blue jeans and white shirts, I realized that he hadn't seen me in a dress since our prom, so I bought a wedding dress, and I just loved it. I had always told him when we were adopting again that I was getting another daughter. And he would shake his head and say, I just don't understand, Ruthie. Good for you. Better you than me. And then he moved into my home with about 6 to 8 girls still there. Now he gets it. And they accept him, and relationships have developed. I want to add that in 1 John 3:2, I read it to say, dear friends, now we are children of God, and what we will be has not yet been known. But we know that when Christ appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Our identity as a child of God means that we fully rely on God and trust in his plan for our lives. And occasionally we just have to trust that life may just include a random chicken in the kitchen or cows out minutes before leaving for church. Rudy has came out several times to help me get cows back in, dressed in church clothes, having left the bus. Or when you remarry that now you have 18 children and 19 grandchildren. So that is my story. I hope to buy a new car today and had made plans, and so I am going to leave. And I sincerely am thankful that you asked to hear my story and that you listened. I thought I turned it off.